Charles, are you done moving yet? My father-in-law grumbles, not bothering to look at me but clearly directing his question at me. He always talks like he's the only one that matters. I've put up with it until now, but I can't anymore. I stop wiping the table and give Charles a hard stare, even though he's not looking at me. I'll be out today, I reply. Charles smirks, satisfied. You've just been a leech in garbage. I'll feel so much better when you're gone. He probably thinks, oblivious to how much his lifestyle has changed. My name's Grace. I turned 40 this year. I'm married to William and currently staying with my in-laws. It's been a few years since we got married, but we don't have kids. We don't plan on having any, and we can anyway. I found out shortly after we got married. I met William at a party, and honestly, if I'd known about his infertility from the beginning, I might not have married him. He told me on our wedding day. It felt like my world crashed down on me. We had dreams of a bright future together, imagining ourselves with perhaps 2 kids and discussing potential names for them. William even joined in on picking out names for our future children. But it was all a deception, or maybe not entirely a deception. Maybe William did desire children and thought about names, despite knowing he couldn't have them. Wasn't that the ultimate betrayal? I married him with the belief that we would create a happy family together, only to be completely deceived by William, whom I trusted implicitly. While some might have immediately filed for divorce upon discovering such a truth, divorce isn't a straightforward option for me. I had already committed to building a family with my in-laws, who are the only ones we can truly call parents. I couldn't just announce to them the day after becoming a family that we were getting divorced. Living with the in-laws meant facing the inevitable question of when we would start a family. So we decided to break the news to them right away. Naturally, we didn't blame William. Instead, we attributed our childlessness to a medical issue on my end. When they found out we couldn't have children, my in-laws were livid. A worthless woman who can't bear children should leave this house immediately, declared my father-in-law Charles, who then began treating me like a servant. From the moment I arrived, I was never treated with respect, always made to feel inferior. I ate alone in the kitchen, cleaning up after the in-laws and William finished their meals. Despite my efforts in the kitchen, I only received scraps. My weight plummeted, and within 6 months of marriage, my wrists were protruding. Previously, it was my mother-in-law Madison who bore the brunt of Charles' anger. But once I joined the family, his focus shifted to me. William noticed Madison's newfound relief. "Mom seems happier lately," he remarked, attributing it to her no longer being the target. Although she never smiled around Charles, I noticed her smiling more when talking to William. Charles's tyranny extended beyond verbal abuse. Once he learned we couldn't have children, he ordered me to work tirelessly from dawn to dusk. "Since you're not fulfilling your role as a woman, at least be useful around the house," he demanded. I had always intended to work after marriage and was eager to leave the house as soon as possible. Balancing chores, work, and arriving home before everyone else was challenging, but having a job with flexible hours helped. However, even when I returned early and completed chores, I never ate with the family or received praise for my cooking. Charles, in particular, often discarded my food without tasting it, deeming it unworthy. Neither William nor Madison ever objected or offered any support. Despite my protests from the kitchen, meal times were usually silent affairs. I couldn't help but wonder if they truly enjoyed eating in such silence. But I can only observe them silently. I had no other option but to get along with my in-laws. I pretended to be friendly and played the role of a devoted wife. I couldn't pinpoint the purpose of it all, but as someone without parents, divorce seemed like an unbearable burden. Then Charles demanded that I hand over all my earnings for the household expenses. I had intended to contribute a portion of my salary, but Charles insisted on all of it, which seemed like an unreasonable demand. What's the point of working if I have no control over my own money? But speaking up was not allowed. Charles's decisions were final, and challenging him wouldn't change anything. It was easier to comply, keeping Charles in a good mood and avoiding the sorrowful looks from Madison and William. Ultimately, the The main source of trouble in this marriage was Charles. Madison and William were not as much of a problem. It was Charles who oppressed and tormented me. It appeared that Madison used to handle the household finances, but it became my responsibility after marriage. Charles, isn't this too much for Grace? Madison dared to question. Shut up. Charles dismissed me in his eyes. Madison and I were treated similarly. As women, our opinions were deemed worthless and not welcomed. I took over the household budget from Madison. When I first saw it, I was shocked, but after several years, I grew accustomed to it. Perhaps because there was another source of income. Charles started spending more extravagantly than before. It's for work, he claimed, increasing his nights out. And the three of them, excluding me, began taking trips during long weekends. They never used to act like this, but suddenly everything changed. He still doesn't see me as part of the family, often referring to me as a burden or worthless. To him, I'm just a maid who doesn't cost anything. In my 20s and 30s, I could brush it off, sometimes even finding peace when Charles wasn't around. But as I neared 40, I couldn't stand his mistreatment any longer. It felt foolish and exhausting to listen to him and obey silently. I grew tired of being afraid of Charles and started standing up for myself. He didn't take kindly to that and gradually grew to resent me. This negative cycle continued to worsen, and recently, my relationship with Charles had deteriorated to the point where we hardly spoke. When he did speak, it was only to insult me. I would fire back, making the atmosphere at home unbearable. It had gotten so bad that he would demand I leave the house. But I refused to go quietly. Where do you expect me to go, knowing I have no family? I would retort every time. Charles would angrily slam his glass on the table, breaking so many that I lost count. Why should I have to deal with this? A woman like you shouldn't talk back. Madison and William would quickly exit the room, sensing another argument brewing. Once it reached this point, it became Charles' one-man show. You should be grateful to even be allowed in this house. Don't get too cocky, you leech, he would rant, his face turning red with anger. We've had this conversation 100 times, I sighed, tired of being yelled at. Normally, I would cave in and apologize. I'm sorry was my usual response, but that day was different. You need to watch what you say, Charles. You're not getting any younger. It's time to calm down. I snapped back sharply, feeling just as irritable. Charles, caught off guard by my defiance, was furious. Who do you think you're talking to? I am the head of this household. A wife like you shouldn't have opinions, he barked. I knew I had crossed a line, but I couldn't stop myself. I've been your wife for years. Isn't it time I'm treated like a human being? You're retired now, with less income. It seems the tables are turning. I continued, unable to contain my pent-up frustration. I confronted Charles directly, and he responded by grabbing me by the collar. I don't need someone like you in my house. I don't want to see your face anymore. Pack your things and leave immediately. He yelled so loudly that the furniture shook. Though I should have apologized right then, I couldn't hold back any longer. Fine, you want me to leave? That's what will make you happy, isn't it, Charles? I challenged him, meeting his gaze defiantly. Yes, he spat out. Unable to remain silent any longer, I declared, then I'll do it. He stormed off to his room with a loud noise, and I, feeling somewhat calmer, began cleaning the living room, which Charles had left in disarray. Madison came to check on me with a worried expression, but left without saying anything, returning to her own room. I realized I had no place in this house anymore. Neither William nor Madison would stand up for me. Years of enduring mistreatment had finally erupted, leaving me feeling more isolated than ever. The next morning, I followed my usual routine, waking up early to start my day. Charles emerged from his room and entered the living room, settling onto the sofa with a newspaper, paying me no mind. Without even glancing up, he casually asked, "Have you finished moving yet?" It was impossible for me to have relocated so swiftly after the events of yesterday. I assumed it was merely a drunken outburst, not a serious demand. Surely he was referring to leaving the house, right? When do you plan on departing? You no longer have the right to reside here. Charles continued, still not meeting my gaze. Halting my task, I turned to face him directly. If he truly intends for me to leave, then I must respond seriously. I'll be gone by today, I declared firmly. Nearby, Madison, frozen with concern, cast a worried glance in my direction. It was evident that once I departed, Charles would refocus his animosity towards her, and she didn't want me to leave. However, Charles had made up his mind. Apologizing and staying was never an option. With a satisfied laugh from Charles echoing behind me, I hurriedly gathered my belongings and left the in-laws' home. Uncertain of my destination, I felt a sense of liberation. I sent a message to William, who was already away. Please proceed with the divorce proceedings. A lawyer would reach out to him. With that, I powered off my phone. In the following days, I engaged a lawyer who reached out to William and the in-laws. Charles, convinced that divorce was inevitable, pressured William to swiftly sign the papers. William hesitated, glancing back and forth between me and the divorce documents. But there was no room for second thoughts. With Charles's insistence and my determination to move forward, he reluctantly complied. I have no money to spare for a woman like you, but dealing with lawyers is a nuisance, so I'll foot the bill, Charles grumbled, his arrogance palpable. The lawyer offered a wry smile at his demeanor. Despite his reluctance, William signed the agreement under Charles's stern gaze. In the presence of the lawyer, I added my signature, and the divorce was finalized. We settled the distribution of assets, and I received compensation for the harassment I had documented. It proved wise to invest in legal support rather than navigate the process alone. Concerned about his reputation, Charles opted to avoid complications by involving lawyers. As the manager of household finances, I was privy to Charles's financial situation, allowing me to propose a settlement within his means. With the property division and harassment compensation settled, I embarked on a comfortable life in my own apartment. While solitude was once daunting, my time living with the in-laws and going through a divorce taught me to appreciate the tranquility of my own space. I relished preparing meals for myself, reveling in the peace of not having anyone to answer to. One day, roughly 3 months post-divorce, Charles's incessant calls flood my phone. Assuming it's nothing positive, I ignore them, but his persistence forces me to accidentally answer. What have you done to my house? His voice reverberates loudly, even without the speaker mode. Instinctively, I pull the phone away from my ear. I haven't done anything. I simply left the house, as you've instructed. I reply defensively. Unsatisfied with my response, Charles continues to berate me. How can you claim you've done nothing? I'm receiving notifications about withdrawal issues since you left. Ah, so he's upset about the withdrawal problems and blames me. I don't know. I didn't take any action. I managed everything according to your directives and paid all dues. I respond, a sense of satisfaction creeping in as I understand why Charles is upset. I suppress a grin, relieved he can't see my reaction. That's absurd. Before you arrived, we managed fine with mine, Madison's, and William's incomes. How much were you earning anyway? I recall that I never disclosed my salary details to Charles. $45,000 take home. I reveal. Charles emits a noise akin to a squashed frog before falling silent. In reality, my job in sales at an investment trust firm primarily consisted of commission-based earnings, contingent on the returns I generated for investors. However, much of it vanished due to Charles' extravagant spending. Nonetheless, I had wisely invested my inheritance, generating some additional income. It wasn't a substantial amount, but it helped cover living expenses. I relied on this income to purchase necessities, although during the property distribution, only William's savings were considered. This was because only assets acquired during our marriage were subject to distribution, excluding the inheritance from my parents and its earnings. Since I utilized all earnings for household expenses throughout the marriage, I had no savings accumulated over the years. The Charles family spent money lavishly, unaware that I was compensating for it. You claim you managed before marriage, but was it on par with our current standard of living? I questioned. Charles's frustration finally boiled over. Don't jest. You should continue contributing to our household expenses. You're the one who caused this mess. So you must take responsibility, he retorted angrily. I couldn't help but chuckle at his absurd statement. I could envision Charles's face reddening as he raised his voice. What's the matter? What are you implying? You were the one who insisted I leave, remember? I simply followed your directive. Why should I, no longer a part of the family, continue providing financial support? I replied, half amused, before hearing a loud crash from the other end. Charles must have thrown another fit. The realization that I no longer had to clean up after him almost made me wish for more destruction. Moreover, we're strangers now, not family, not anything. Please refrain from assuming familial obligations. Manage your own finances. I left you with enough to sustain yourself, didn't I? With that, I bid him farewell and disconnected the call. I anticipated more calls from Charles, but none came. I thought perhaps he was feeling remorseful, but it seemed that wasn't the case. Instead, it appeared he was too ashamed to admit he couldn't meet the payments. He resorted to pressuring William and Madison to borrow money from financial institutions to cover their expenses. While payments were made, it only led to accumulating debt. Refusing to adjust their lifestyle, they continued living beyond their means. Continuing like this will only lead to more debt. You need to make changes, I warned, but they persisted, unable to meet their financial obligations and sinking further into debt each month. William reached out to me, foolishly considering reconciliation and even suggesting severing ties with his father to reunite. How could he propose such a thing now, after failing to defend me against Charles's mistreatment? Despite my decision to stand by William, knowing we couldn't have children, he never protected me. His suffocation under Charles' influence is no longer my concern. I wish they would grasp the consequences of their actions and endure the repercussions. Now, the in-laws find themselves burdened by debt yet unwilling to adjust their lifestyle. Charles, now working as a contract laborer with reduced pay, and William and Madison have taken up part-time security positions. It's not just Charles. Madison and William are also guilty of refusing to downsize their living standards. Despite being stretched to their limit, they refuse to make sacrifices. I used to be consumed with protecting William, but now I prioritize my own well-being. At 40, the prospect of having children may be challenging, but I remain open to the possibility. Before the divorce, mornings felt like a burden, but now I wake up feeling rejuvenated. I eagerly anticipate a brighter future in my newfound independence.